This is a painting I did in my Michael's haul video a little while back, but I got a lot of requests for a tutorial for it, so here it is. Heads up, I'm having a little bit of a nasty voice day, so I'm going to try and be real gentle on it. But we're going to get into this painting. The materials I actually talk about all in my Michael's video, so I'm going to link that in the description so you can check it out. But we're going to be using these Georgian oil paints. So this is an oil painting we're about to do. We're going to use titanium white, rose madder, quinacridone, primary cyan, lemon yellow, and raw umber. If you don't have these exact colors, that's totally okay. Honestly, if you just have a yellow, a red, a blue, and a white, you're gonna be able to just do this just fine. No worries. If you wanna try it in acrylics instead of oils, go for it, but know that the blending techniques aren't gonna be able to work the same, but you can still make a gorgeous acrylic painting with this as opposed to an oil painting, but we're using oils here. This is a little bit more of an advanced tutorial, heads up, but if you're a beginner, try it anyway. Why not? It's gonna help you grow faster. So we're going to start mixing up our colors here. We're starting with our blue, adding a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow. I realized that the red pigment isn't as strong with these paints as it normally is with my other paints I use, so I ended up using a lot more red than I normally do to try and get these muted down blue colors. The opposite of blue on the color wheel is orange. So when you add orange to blue, it mutes the color down a little bit and just makes it a little less vibrant, which can give a little bit of a realism to your painting. And what I'm doing here is I'm adding some color gradients to my palette. So I'm just taking the darkest color and I'm slowly moving to a little bit of a lighter blue. So I have 3 blues there. And now I want to have a transition color to some warmer colors because we started really cool. And so I'm adding all of my colors together to make more of like a purpley, orangey, kind of warmer blue as our transition. And then we're gonna move to more of like orangey kind of colors. So we're gonna go heavy on the yellows, heavy on the reds, mix that up so that it's got like a more warm color. What I wanna do is have the shadowed parts of my water be much cooler, darker, and then the highlighted parts of my water to have more of a warmth to them, like lights hitting it. It's got a warm, like sunsetty kind of light to it. So we've got all those like bluish to grayish, taupey kind of colors there at the top. And now we're doing our warmest colors. And you can see it, those blues at the top too. You can see them go from cool to warm. What I'm doing here is I'm adding a little bit of the previous color to my orange here so that when I'm applying them to my painting, it's gonna blend and be more cohesive of a color palette, just so part of those colors are pulled into each other so they look nice together. And then I'm going for my little lightest yellowy kind of color, which is gonna be the bulk of my highlights. Also, just so you know, I'm definitely gonna tweak my colors as I move through. I often do that. I'll mix up all my colors beforehand when I'm doing oils, but then as I go along, I kind of like to fix them. I realized I didn't like the color I'd chosen before, and so I kind of just tweak them. So now we're getting into our actual painting. You can see that my canvas looks pretty orange. Also, this is a 9x12 inch canvas, but my canvas looks really orange. It's because I toned it with some acrylic paint that's burnt sienna. It just gives me a nice warm color to work on top of, especially if I have some more see-through oil paints or a little less expensive oil paints like I'm working with here. The canvas color often comes through, so I wanted to have a color to work on top of so that when it does come through, it gives it a nice warmth. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I'm a big fan of toning your paintings before getting started because I think it makes the whole thing look really neat by the end. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking a flat brush. These are Daler-Rowney brushes. You can see me talk about them in that Michael's video that's in the description. And what I'm doing is I'm taking my darkest blue and I'm just sketching out where the shadowed parts of my water are gonna be. I have like a vague reference photo that I'm working with here, but I kinda am just going off what I know about how water works from painting so much water. I know not everyone's gonna be able to do that, so you're welcome to take a screenshot of the end painting of what it looks like at the very end, or you can just follow along with what I'm doing, whatever you feel like, but I'm just getting those darkest shadowed parts on my painting first so that when I start to apply all the different layers, I have like a sketch to work with before. if you are using the end, like a screenshot of the end painting to use as like a reference photo, and you're not really as comfortable with like freehand sketching like I am. I did a lot of drawing growing up, so I really like freehand sketching when I'm painting. A lot of people do gridding, a lot of people do tracing. You can do those things to try and get your painting to look more quote unquote accurate, or you can just go willy-nilly like I'm doing. So now I'm taking that lighter blue and I'm filling in some of the areas for this painting that are going to be just slightly more lightened. There's a little bit more light hitting these areas, and they're going to be just underneath the darkest parts of the shadow. They're just like a little bit of a lighter blue. They're still definitely shadowed. They're just kind of an extension of the darkest part of the shadow where light is starting to move just a little bit more on those guys. The way I'm applying this to make it look like water is I'm having these shapes that kind of thicken and thin, like almost like really soft diamonds that are on their sides. They start really thin, get thicker, and then taper off. It's kind of how water moves. So you can see me using that kind of shape in a lot of my water shapes here. It kind of takes a little bit to get used to, but the more you can figure out this shape, the more organic your water starts to look. Now I'm taking that middle blue, that like slightly lighter blue, and I'm just adding little bits of highlights to some of those shadowed areas we had filled in there, just because I know there's just a little more light hitting those areas. Painting water is all about light. It's all about seeing where light hits, seeing where light is absent, seeing where light is really shining. The more you can look at light on water, the better you're going to be able to accurately represent water in your paintings. So now I'm taking that middle blue color and I'm kind of filling in some areas I know more light is hitting, right? Some of the areas that are still orange currently on our canvas. I'm filling those in. I also want to say too that our painting is going to get much lighter as we move up, because we're going to be able to see the light more, because our light source is from the back, quote unquote, which is actually higher up in our canvas when you look at it like spatially. The bottom part of the painting is going to be a lot darker than the top part, just something to keep in mind. But there are going to be layers of light added on with the way the water moves. My voice is getting all raspy. Hear that? Whenever my voice goes, that's bad for me, you should tell me in the comments to not do that, because it's bad for me. I have something called muscle tension dysphonia, and I'm not allowed to do that, says my vocal coach. But it's hard not to, so I'm trying to keep it nice and smooth, make my voice sound really chill, no graveliness, that's not healthy for my voice. Just making it nice and mellow as we're talking about this painting. I'm still taking that light color and adding in these not the shadow parts, the highlight parts. This is an even lighter blue now, where I'm adding those to the parts where the shadows are absent. So that stretch in the middle where we're still seeing a lot of orange, we're adding in some of that, it's like that orangey blue, lighter orange kind of color. We're filling in that space because there is going to be light that's hitting that area. You'll also be seeing me occasionally take a big flat brush that's totally dry right here. I'm totally doing it here, and I'm just rubbing it across the painting. And what I'm doing here is, because oil paints dry really slow, this helps the colors blend together. I'm not doing this too much because I don't want to lose all my detail. And the more you brush it out, the less detail you're going to have, and it'll blend together. And if that's what you want, that's great. But I just do it in a way that's just very soft, blends the colors together, and you'll see me do it periodically throughout this painting. It's one of my favorite things about oil paints, that gives me the ability to brush out those colors and blend them real smooth. It's something that acrylics can't give you. So now I'm taking a little thinner filbert brush, I'm taking those oranges, and I'm kind of adding in a couple little highlights to parts where I know light's hitting in the shadowed areas, just like some little specks of light where light might be hitting. And I'm also filling in more areas where I know there's going to be a lot more light, which is going to be that upper half of our painting there. Ooh, clink. I just hit my little chai tea cup against my water bottle. You're going to see me avoiding the shadowed parts as I'm putting these lighter colors on. I'm taking a little bit of that blue because I know there's just slightly more more shadowed, the more cool the color I'm using, the less light is hitting, and the warmer my colors move to, the more light is going to be touching those areas. You can see me kind of, the method I'm using for applying this paint here is really loose. I'm kind of just like throwing the paint on there like really willy-nilly. I love using that term, willy-nilly, can you tell? And I'm not really worrying about blending anything too bad. I'm kind of just slapping the paint on there because once I do this and I get the paint kind of on there in like kind of a sketchy kind of way and I take that big flat brush again and blend everything out, it's going to really smooth together and it's going to keep some of that burnt sienna orange in the background and have it show through because I want that warmth to come through. I'm taking my yellow, it's like a white yellow. Oh, my voice is getting all, can't be doing that. Got to keep my voice at the front of my mouth. Taking the yellow, white yellow, and I'm adding it to the center of the painting. This is where most of the light's going to be. If you think about a sunset with the sun right in the center, most of the light and the sparkles are going to hit right down the center. So I'm also adding it a little bit on the sides in a couple areas, especially as we move up. It kind of moves in like a triangle, wider at the top, moves a little bit narrower at the bottom. And I'm adding it into a couple places in the lower parts of our painting too, because there are going to be some little bits of light that start to sparkle on the bottom parts too. Here I am taking my big flat dry brush. It's just like a big flat brush, right? No paints on it. It's really clean. And I'm just brushing it all, and you can see that that kind of sketchy, scrappy kind of look that my oils had are now blended out into this really nice smooth look that allows me to have, well, I don't know what I'm saying. It allows me to add more detail on top. That's the other thing I want you to know with this method that I use with the oil paints is that I'm doing my layers really thinly. There isn't a lot of thick areas where the paint is like kind of clumped up. It's all very, very thin layers that I use. And I do this because when you're using oil paints, sometimes it can be tricky to use wet on top of wet because they dry so slow. It's not really a thing where you can just wait a couple minutes like acrylics and then do another layer. They don't work like that. So if you do a thin layer, it's a lot easier to add more wet paint on top as opposed to a thick layer. It's gonna like slide around. It's something that's gonna come with time. You're not gonna be able to, I at least found that when I'm working with oil paints, and I like have worked with them for years and years, the longer I worked with them, the more I was able to understand how like the fluid dynamics of the paint worked. Now I'm deciding that some of my shadowed areas have kind of blended out too much and I want a little more definition there. So I'm taking, I think I've got a little filbert brush there which just has a little rounded top. I'm taking my darkest blue again and kind of just defining my little peaks of the waves with my dark color again. I want that to have some solid contrast to it. It kind of creates a little more drama in the light when you have high contrast, so a really dark color with a really light color, which is often what sunset kind of paintings, photographs, all that kind of stuff are. They have a lot of contrast, they have a lot of drama. It makes them really interesting visually. So I want to add a little more visual interest here, give a little more definition to these shadows. Adding at the bottom, defining those little peaks of our waves. You'll get used to how the shape of waves look. I moved because light was coming in through my window and starting to hit my painting, and it was looking terrible on camera, so now we're against a different wall. And I set up my little bookshelf to have my little tiny easel sit on top of. But we're doing the same thing. We're taking those dark colors and we're defining our shadowed areas a little bit more. And we're kind of moving to slightly lighter colors as we're doing this. And remember too, you're working on top of wet paint now. So it's going to be a little bit different than working on top of the straight canvas that has the just the dried acrylic burnt sienna on it. It's going to feel different and it's going to blend differently. You're going to have to wash your paintbrush, quote unquote, more often. What I do for that is I like brush it off on a paper towel a lot, so it's just mostly clean. A lot of people use paint thinners to clean their brush off. I don't do that. I don't like the chemicals, so I either wash it off with soap and water, which is labor intensive, or I'll just get it as clean as possible by wiping up as much of the paint as I can so that it's nice and dry for when I go in the next time. And I end up using a lot of different brushes, so I don't have to clean brushes in between colors. Now that I've got most of those shadow details added, I'm going in with my flat brush again. That's nice and dry. That guy too, I'm also in between everything. I am making sure I'm cleaning it off on a paper towel. Now I decided I've used all my colors and I want a little more vibrancy to this painting. It's looking a little dull for me, so you can see me mixing up a little bit of a brighter orange, which means I just added more pure yellow and pure red. So I can get this brighter orange where I'm starting to highlight the details. This is like more of the detail part of your painting where the bulk of it is done and you're just kind of adding whatever you feel like you need. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this color here and mostly on the top parts of our shadow, not going into the shadow, but just sitting right on top of the shadow is where these highlight colors are gonna go. And that's because the light from the back is hitting the back of these wave peaks. If that makes sense, if you like visually 3D imagine a wave, the part that we're seeing the front of is shadowed because the light is behind it. So the top parts of the waves are where the light's gonna be hitting. I added a little more red to that paint to make it a little darker, to add some like darker vibrancy, just because I thought it would look cool. I'm not looking at a reference photo at all anymore. I was using a vague reference photo before, but now I'm just kind of going in for whatever I feel like is best. Adding these details wherever I want, kind of adding some like pink highlights that are just a little bit dark, just adding some more color. I want this to be more of a vibrant painting than I had made it initially. And you can do this or you could not do this. You do whatever you feel. This is just detail time for me. And I'm a big fan of the color orange and red, both colors. They're really big on my list of cool colors. And I love seeing purples and blues next to reds and oranges in paintings. It's a lot of how sunset paintings end up looking. And I want that to be in my painting. Now I'm taking that yellow and I've added more white to it. So it's really, really, really bright because these are going to be some of our biggest highlights. We're just adding layers of highlights here now. And what I'm doing is I'm carefully adding some streaks of light where I think the light from the sun might be hitting. Again, making sure it's on top of our little shadowed peaks. And this is going to start to really bring our painting to life. It's going to make the light look more realistic. Just adding layers of this light. Drinking game. Actually, no, don't do this because it would probably kill you. I was gonna say take a sip every time I say the word light, but I think if I said that I would be liable for many alcohol poisoning. So please don't. Please do not use any of my videos for drinking games. Thank you. Please and thank you. You can see me adding a little more highlights to those darker, mostly shadowed areas. That's because I want a couple little sparkles of light to be hitting there. Even though they're mostly shadowed, just a little specks of sparkles are going to start to show up in those areas. I'm adding a little more of an orangey color there again. Again, I love orange. I'm a big fan of orange. Wanting to add those highlights in here. You can see too, I'm kind of neglecting the center of the painting with these highlights too, and that's because I'm gonna go in with pure white to make some of these sparkles. See me doing like little dabs of paint there too. Because when I take my dry flat brush again, where I do this blending technique, and again, right here I'm being very careful. I don't want to blend this out too much because I want to keep these details. So be very gentle about blending in this section. But when I blend out those little specks there at the bottom, they starting to look a little more sparkly. Now you can see me taking pure white. There's my little face too. You don't get to see that very much. And I'm adding pure white. Actually, it's not pure white. I think it's got a little bit of yellow in it. Starting to add this to mostly the center of the painting. And a couple little areas on the sides too where light's hitting, but it's gonna be chilling mostly in the center. And you can see the more layers of highlights we add, the more realistic this water starts to look. Adding a couple places you wouldn't think, just where maybe I think light is kind of coming through. Doing my little dry brush thing again, blending it out very carefully. I don't want to lose those details. Doing it very softly and making sure I'm washing it in between, or washing as in drying it off on a paper towel. And now I believe this is now almost pure white, if not just like a little bit of yellow in it. And I'm adding another layer of highlights here. And there's the pure white. So I just put more white on my palette, and it's just nothing but white. And I'm just starting to, like, you can see me kind of tapping my brush in places almost, adding little clumps of this white, and I'm leaving it actually a little bit clumpy. I'm kind of getting it clumpy on my brush and applying it in little dabs, because when I take my dry brush in here, as we're doing these sparkles and we blend them out, it's gonna give this sparkly kind of radiant light effect. So I'm doing a motion where I'm taking it up, dry brush moving up, and then also sideways, and it gives the globs of paint an almost like diamond-like radiant light effect. And then I'm also creating these kind of little diamonds where I'm doing little lines of light with bright white on areas that have like a little horizontal line. So it looks like a real sparkle, like a little diamond-shaped sparkle. I'm just adding those in wherever I feel like. There's no right or wrong answer here. I tend to go a little bit lighter on my sparkles first and then add more if I feel like it, because I don't want to overdo it. Sometimes less is more when it comes to the sparkles. But I'm doing that same thing where I'm doing the motion where I go horizontal and then vertical with my brush, vertical with my brush, horizontal. See, I'm cleaning it off on my little bookshelf there. And I'm just blending those out so they get this like really transparent, pretty, shining, glimmery look to them. And that's about it. Leave a comment, let me know how you did if you did this painting with me. People who support me on Patreon get the unedited version of this video, so just the full length, like 3-hour-long video. If you're interested in that and supporting me in the stuff I do, you're welcome to check out my Patreon. The link's in my description. I gotta go give my little voice a break, so I'll see you in the next video.